Hey guys, welcome back to Project E. Man, we're out here on Grand Lake. It's kind of what Oklahoma is calling the third winter. We actually had snow a couple days ago. It was crazy. It's the end of April and it snowed. Water temperature's all the way back down to 58 degrees. I'm sure it was up in the mid 60s, but we're out here on Grand, one of my most favorite lakes, and we're gonna fish a technique that I think is one of the best techniques this time of the year. When fish are spawning, you got a cold front come through, they kind of pull off, on, off. I'm gonna show you this technique right here today on Project E.
From the top of the mountain, yeah, we float away to the top of the mountain. Yeah, we float away to the top of the mountain. Yeah, we never coming down from the top of the mountain.
This is what a swing jig is. You've got a weight that moves all right here around the head. So this is hitting the bottom and this is just floating back up there behind it. It just kind of causes a ruckus the whole time. This is just going down along the bottom, you know, then with this bait back here. It's kind of it's just a hybrid bait. It's a cross between a jig and a crankbait because I'm able to reel it at a constant speed. But that's a swing jig. It is a fish catching dude. Oh, it's a good one too. Oh God, dog. Oh, that was a big one. Dadgummit. Just a fish. Just a fish. One of the reasons I love a swing jig is I can just cover water with it. I feel like it's a very effective bait, you know, that I can keep on the bottom. I can be disturbing that bottom, you know, making a ruckus for those fish spawning, yet I'm still able to reel it in fast. You know, if I was having to throw a jig or a worm or something else, you know, it's just slower. You know, with the swing jig, I'm able to reel that thing at a constant speed, continually bump the bottom almost like a crankbait, yet I'm able to cover water. Man, that's a chunky one. Get in the boat. Look how fat that dude is. Oh, I love it. Golly, they're healthy. Healthy, healthy, healthy. Thanks, buddy. Awesome. Awesome. The way that I throw this bait, I'm constantly reeling it. And I'm reeling it fast enough that I still feel the bottom, but not too fast that I've got it off the bottom. So once you've determined, you know, what size head you need for the depth you're fishing, just reel that bait, you know, at a speed that you can keep constant contact with the bottom, because that's the beauty of this bait. This bait's just banging and clanging on all those rocks, and that's the drawing power of it. You know, if I was to reel it faster, you know, I'm gonna bring it off the bottom, but it's not a bait that I work like a jig or a Carolina rig. I'm constantly moving it. It's a bait that I'm gonna get a reaction strike out of, almost like a crankbait or a spinnerbait. Oh, I got a tree, I got a bass, I got all kinds of stuff happening. He's cold. Healthy fish though. Thanks, bud. So many of the times when you get a bite, you know, on a swing jig like this, you know, that little fish right there, I just lose weightlessness. You know, I lose contact with the bottom. You know, I'm sitting there reeling it, keeping constant contact with the bottom, and then all of a sudden it's not like anything's pulling on it or anything's tugging on it. It's just like you just don't feel the rocks anymore. You know, so many of the bites are that way, you know, because you're constantly moving. You can just see my rod's just constantly bumping, but then like when a fish gets it, the speed doesn't change, the tug doesn't change, but it actually just, you lose that little peck, peck, peck that you're feeling of those rocks as it's bumping on the rocks. Oh, just a little one. Just a little one. When I'm fishing this bait, I really try to consciously keep my rod pointed towards that bait. You know, there's times when I get my rod at a 90-degree angle to it. Well, the problem is I don't have a lot of hook set movement there. So if I can point my rod towards the bait, I've got that much more room that I can set the hook. I think that's very important. You know, this bait is notorious about just losing fish because, you know, you've got so much weight out on the head. They've got a lot of leverage with it. So do everything you can to put things in your favor. And one of them is pointing the rod more towards the bait. It'll give you that much more room to set the hook. I really like to put my boat in a position that I can parallel the banks. You know, I want to keep that bait in the strike zone as long as possible. That's why I nosed right up here behind this dock so I could throw parallel down that bank. You know, that way my bait's going to be in the strike zone the entire time I'm trying to reel it in. I like it, I like it, I like it, I like it. Another big advantage to paralleling those banks, I'm able to keep my bait in constant contact with the bottom. You know, if I'm 45 in these banks like this, well then my bait's, I've got to slow it down to make contact because each time it gets a little deeper, I have to stop that bait to, you know, to let it get back down to the bottom, to settle back to the bottom. If I'm able to parallel the bank, man, I can reel that thing the entire way in because I'm in that one depth and I'm able to drag it over them rocks the entire way in and I don't have to stop, let it go back to the bottom. You know, Tommy Biffle's the one who put this whole swing jig head deal on the map. You know, he won a tournament right here in Oklahoma and, you know, really none of us had ever heard of it prior to that. But it's been one of those techniques that it's just not here in Oklahoma. And it's not just, you know, I know we're doing it here in the spring and it really shines in the spring. But there's times in the fall it can be really good. There's times around the shad spawn it can be really good. And it also works up north. I have absolutely killed the smallmouth on this technique, you know, up north. It's just amazing when you put a pretty heavy one of these in and just let it just do its thing on its bottom, on the bottom as you're reeling it in. Them smallmouth can't stand it. He hit it right out here closer to the boat. Super important with this bait. Of all the baits you ever throw, you just got to retie often because you're dragging it on the bottom so much, you know, and the whole key to it a lot of times is having that chunkier rock, so it's just really hard on your line. So I retie often, I mean more often than normal with this bait. You know, with the swing head jig, you've got to retie a lot. One thing I have to be super careful of that I'm really bad about, you know, I want to cover water so fast, I want to be moving down this bank, yet paralleling the bank with my bait. Man, I lose a lot of fish because I'm going towards the bait, I get the bite, I go to set the hook, and I haven't really set the hook because my bait's coming towards me, my boat's going towards the bait. You know, I lost a couple really nice fish today because I was in such a big hurry trying to get the first few bites. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't get to going too fast towards your bait because if you're going straight towards your bait and you set the hook, it doesn't work good. Golly, I can't catch up to him. And that's a prime example. I had to do more reeling than I did hook setting because, I mean, he was swimming right at me. Fat one, isn't he? Look how fat he is. What I mean by that is so many of those bites, you know, when you're fishing this bait, it's a reel and then a hook set. You know, like if you just set the hook and then didn't reel, I would have never caught that fish. He was swimming so fast with it, had to really reel super fast in order to get that fish caught. Another way to describe the bite, you know, it's just like it's got a leaf on it. It's, you know, you feel that thing bumping, and then all of a sudden you got a leaf on it. That's a lot of times what the bite feels like. It's just you've lost contact with the bottom. Another one. Not a big one, but a fish. It's one thing, this technique will not work. Just peeing all over the place. On a lake that you've got grass or a lot of slime or moss on the bottom, you know, this is a clean bottom technique, you know, a rocky type bottom technique. Don't try this, you know, on lakes that you got a lot of slime, moss, grass. It's not gonna work on those kinds of lakes. Fought that stick all the way to the boat. Seems just to be a lot of male small bass up here. Full moon's just a few days away. You know, it's probably when those bigger ones are gonna move up. There's one. That's a good one. Yeah, not as big as I thought it was, but it's a fish. He first come up out there, I thought he was a giant. Thanks, buddy. Man, the weight of your hard head is super important of your swing jig. You know, if I'm fishing really, you know, deeper, I'm gonna go with a lot heavier one, but you know, up shallow, you don't wanna go with too heavy of one because it just gets snagged really bad, you know. So today with this color water, I'm fishing shallow. I mean, these fish are gonna set up shallow. If it was clear, I'd be out deeper using a little bit heavier one, but use the watercolor to dictate what size swing head you're putting on. Golly, I got a big one, or it's got me. Drum. Gosh dang it, I thought that was a bass. He's a jumper. Oh, gosh. Jimmy Houston would say that one counts. I got him all the way to the boat. Jimmy would count that one. Hey, real quick, let's do our power stop breakdown. You know, I think that the rod is super critical. You know, I put this on about as heavy a rod that I can put on and as long a rod that I can put it on. I've got it on a 7/6 heavy action rod. You know, something that I can move a lot of line with when I go to set the hook. You know, it's just the nature of this bait. It gets a lot of bites, but you lose a lot of fish too. You know, so many times you're making such a long cast. They've got all this weight out here to be able to throw the bait. But, you know, I don't go with super big line and super light line. You know, the line for me dictates the depth. You know, the deeper I'm fishing, obviously the lighter the line I need to go, you know, like down to a 12 or a 14, let's say if I was on Table Rock. But here on Grand, you know, 17-pound test fluorocarbon works most of the time for me. You know, it's a bait that I don't need 20 on because one, it's gonna make the bait ride up, and just not gonna cast as good. So 17-pound test today for me, a little 1/2 ounce Berkeley Fusion swing head jig. You know, I probably could have gone to a 3/8 ounce as shallow as these fish were. You can see that thing's just all ate up. It's just a lot of fun to fish. You know, I know today we didn't get on any of those big ones. It's kind of a short day, getting cut short. We got a big storm rolling in. But it's just a bait that, you know, works really well around the spawn, but I don't want to say it's the only time it works. You know, for me, I don't throw this bait super deep. That's one other thing I want to talk about that I might have forgot to mention. You know, I don't throw it out there 15 to 20 feet. You know, for me, this bait is a 2 to 8 foot type bait. You know, that's where it really shines. You can throw it deeper than 8 foot, but it gets to be a struggle to keep it on the bottom and still be able to move that bait. But you know, today I got a lot of bites on this thing. Didn't catch any of those big ones. We're getting kind of cut short with some rain coming in. But it's a lot of fun to fish. It's a bait you need to have in your arsenal, especially this time of year around that spawn. Man, it can catch a lot of fish. A lot of fun to fish, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. We'll see you next week.